Okay, I am going to mute and you two are good.
Okay. Well, hello.
Hey,
My name is Julie Anderson. I am the Outreach Director at Restore Justice, Illinois. I got involved with this work because my son Eric was convicted and then sentenced to life without parole when he was 15 years old. He has served a little bit over 25 years as of now. In 2017, he was able to be resentenced to 30 years in prison due to a Miller v. Alabama ruling by the US Supreme Court. So now we await his release date. In the meantime, I'm so lucky today to have Nelson here, Nelson Morris, who is a returning citizen. He did quite a bit of time in prison. And during COVID, Nelson, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
yes, my name is Nelson Morris. I'm also a program associate for Restore Justice. I'm an impact individual. I did 29 years in a month. I was a juvenile lifer. I had natural life in 35 years. And under Miller versus Alabama, I was able to get resentenced, and I've been home for about 8 months.
Well,
And
welcome.
I'm 47. I was incarcerated at 17.
Oh, good. Well, not good.
Right.
Anyway, it's been well documented over the course of the last year or so that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted people in prison. While improper COVID safety protocols in prison have come under increasing public and media scrutiny, there's a lot less discussion surrounding the difficulties that formerly incarcerated individuals face after being released from prison during a pandemic. Today, we're going to chat with Nelson, whose story sheds light on both COVID-19 in prison and the particular challenges formerly incarcerated individuals have faced in the midst of being released from prison during a pandemic. I want to thank you so much for being here with us today, Nelson.
Welcome.
And the other week, we chatted with James about COVID-19 in prison. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience being in prison during a pandemic?
Yes, it was really scary because all the only information we had was what we was hearing on the news, and the officers was really not telling us nothing, and the few memos that we had wasn't accurate, and it was really scary because like I said, we just had our information from the news and our loved ones that we talked to on the phone, and the staff wasn't doing anything at the time. There was no soap, there was no mask, there was nothing to protect us from this epidemic.
Yeah, I can imagine that it was scary here. It had to be really scary in prison. And I know it was scary for families who had loved ones in prison. When did it first become a concern at Vienna?
It became a real concern. I said May of 2020, because they stopped the visits in March. They stopped the visits March 18th. And that's when they stopped all yards. So there was no yards, there's no rec. We couldn't be in day rooms, and it was like a lockdown situation. So that's when we knew it was like really serious.
So did the prison staff keep you informed of how these lockdowns were going to work, or
No,
when you would see yard again?
no. All they were saying is they don't know. Nobody knew anything. And it took months before they started giving us masks. But once they started giving us masks, that's when we knew, like, hey, okay, this is really serious. Yeah.
So did you have any regular access to news reports? And if you did, where did you get that information from? I mean, just general TV or?
Just general TV, general television. That's where we got all our information from. There was no, and they was giving us memos, like they was telling us, well, this particular institution has so many people sick, or this institution. They was giving us memos of that nature, but we wasn't getting any memos telling us about our prison and how this was going to affect us, and how long this was going to be, or how serious it really was. It was just like, hey, we have epidemic, people are sick in these prisons, y'all on lockdown.
So I know that when you talk memos, they don't actually give you a piece of paper, right? They have a
No,
different,
sometimes they do. In Vienna, they actually did. They gave us paper. They actually gave us paper memos.
okay, because is it on the TV also, or do you have an?
Yes, it was also on the tablets. You know, we are issued, well,
Okay,
we're not issued, we are able to buy tablets, and they will put certain information on the tablets.
yeah, that's good. If you don't have a tablet, what do you do though?
If you don't have a tablet, yeah, if you don't have a tablet, you're not entitled to, well, I'm not gonna say entitled, but you're not able to access that information.
Ah, that's difficult. So do you think that they took, besides going on lockdown immediately, which was a very swift reaction, did they take any other precautions in the early days of COVID? You just mentioned
No,
that they really weren't wearing masks, or
no, they wasn't wearing masks, and we was on lockdown, and I was in Vienna, so we have keys to our rooms, and we have like free movement. So when they fed us on lockdowns, we had to come to them. They didn't come to us. So they would come to the day room with the trays, and then we would line up and one by one get a tray. And they was passing us trays out with no gloves, with no mask, with no lid. And they was literally taking the lid off, and they was like passing to another officer until they get to us. So you got 4, 5 officers, and they get one tray, and they're passing the officer to get to us, and they breathing over the food. So yeah, they was really reckless at the
so
beginning.
they didn't have masks either.
No.
But yet they restricted everything. But you had to line up you had to get in line
Yes.
to get your meals, your tray,
Yes.
as you call it.
Yes.
Oh, that's so upsetting.
Yes. And they would literally, it would be 5 officers there, bring the trays in there, stack them up on the table, and one officer would take the one tray off the stack and pass to the other one, and he'll pass to us. No masks, no lids. So you have all these hands, all these people breathing on the food as they pass it to us.
And how did they do restrictions as far as, because everyone's on lockdown, as far as like cleaning your gallery or your deck? Who
Well,
did that?
they would assign somebody a detail to clean the wing, and I must admit the people that was on our wing, we was really scared of this situation, so we all like try to contribute, but it's kind of hard to clean up when you don't have the proper, you know, utensils and everything to clean up. You don't have bleach, you don't have you don't have soap like you should, so people was using a commissary soap that you only could get like a few bars of to clean around them.
And when you talk a bar of soap from commissary, you're talking one of those little tiny bars of soap. Am I right?
Yeah.
And you're limited on how many you can buy?
Yes.
Ah,
3. You can buy 3 bars of soap every
three
commissary.
of the little tiny like motel bars.
The bars,
Is
yeah.
that a week?
Well, they have different brands, but yeah. The small bars, the bars, yeah.
You could buy 3 of those a week.
Yeah. Well, it depends if you go every week. You buy 3 of those every commissary. You don't always go to commissary every week. So every other week, every 3 weeks.
And no sanitizer. Like when you got your trays, did everyone get a squirt of sanitizer?
No, there was no sanitizer.
So really,
and I left in August of 20, and no, there was no sanitizer.
So there, in some ways, well, we don't know how bad the epidemic went in prisons, really, because they really didn't do testing till December.
Right.
So what was this like? How did this change? Because you were in prison a long time, 29 years.
Yes.
And how did COVID change that? What was it like to go without outside time or be on lockdown?
COVID was hard because it was the whole not knowing, and I personally know guys that was going through this and their mothers had COVID, their family members had COVID, and they had no access to them, no visits, so they had no access to them to check on their loved ones. And it was a really scary time. I think, and I know this is big coming from me saying this, but that was one of the most scariest times during my whole time in jail was the COVID. because
Did
I
you
was really scared for my well-being and I had no way to fight it off. It's just the luck of the draw. Please don't let me get sick.
Yeah, you had no way to distance yourself.
No.
Did they limit your phone and video?
Yes, yes, they limit. They start implementing phone lists, so it was harder to get on the phone. It was harder to stay connected to your family. They only had it was only so many people that was allowed in the day room, and they call this social distancing, but it didn't make any sense because the day room, if you saying you can only have 3 people in the day room, but yet you got people sleeping on top of each other. What sense does that make? You know, you locking me in a room where I'm right underneath or on top of somebody else in a small quarters. So what does it matter if I use the phone in the day room?
So you have 2 people to each cell
Yes. 2 people to a cell.
and you're in bunk beds.
Yes.
Okay. And now do you have a solid door on there or is
Yes.
it
It's a solid door.
bars? So you're kind of locked in there. For how many hours a day were you locked in there?
Well, in Vienna it was a little different for us in Vienna because there's no toilets or sinks in the cell. So we use a communal bathroom. So they couldn't keep us locked up in the room. They had to let us be able to go to the bathroom and use the bathroom or shower or whatever. Because Vienna is a minimum.
Right. So then you could take a shower whenever, or were there restricted?
Yes, well, for us, we was very fortunate because Vienna is a minimum. So like your son Eric, for example, he's not able to take showers like that because he's not in the minimum and they're not doing transfers of that nature. So it was a lot harder for people like your son as opposed to me because I could shower when I wanted to because there was no toilet or sink in the room, in the cell.
Yeah. Yeah. He talked about having to wait like 2 weeks for a shower, which
Yes.
last summer, if we think back to that, it was an extremely hot summer.
Yes.
I just can't imagine having that many bodies with lack of soap in a confined area and no showers for 14 days. It just seems really,
Cruel.
really like torture. So you were lucky. But when you went to the bathroom, there's no soap. You have to bring your own little
There's
mini
no
bar.
soap. There's no soap. And you're just as scared because it's a communal bathroom. So everything is right next to each other. And if there's no soap and you know, it's somebody else using the bathroom next to you, or is it somebody in front of you using the sink and they sneeze, they cough and you know, so you really, really scared, like, oh, please just don't let me get sick. But there's nothing you can really do to prevent it.
So when you talk to your family and now you're worried because your family members
Yes.
may have COVID, but how much did you raise concerns with them because you don't want them to worry about you, right? I mean,
Exactly. You don't really want, so you know, you try to downplay everything and just try to really just like, how you doing? How you doing? I'm okay. You know, like I used to always tell them, I did 30 years of this. I've been doing this all my life. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. How you doing? You know, because I had a few family members have COVID and I was really worried about that. So I was really concerned for my loved ones.
yeah, that would be hard. And did you ever get tested in Vienna for COVID?
I was okay. Well, you know, upon my release, I really pushed them. I wrote grievances. I don't know if everybody listeners know what a grievance is, but it's uh, self-explanatory. When you feel like they're doing something wrong to you or whatever, you able to write fill out a grievance form and tell them your problem. And I had wrote grievances letting them know like, hey, I'm about to be released, and I'm paroling the people who's a little older, and to protect them and myself, I really need to be tested. So I wrote grievance after grievance after grievance until and then they finally let me. The day I left, they tested me. Just me though. I didn't leave by myself, but just me.
But so you had to actually really kind of try to fight for a test.
Yeah.
Did you see them, like, did anyone around you get sick that they would have come and got them and tested them, or?
Well, at the time, they still, upon my release, they still wasn't testing people like that. So like the whole prison, and they had outside tents. If they thought you was sick, if they thought you had a fever, they would put you in the outside tent. Yeah, and keep you there until the 14th day. Yeah, and then they had wings that they had designated for, okay, these are quarantine wings. So they would, you know, if they thought you were sick or if you had a fever, they would move you, they would move you and your neighbors, and they would put you in a quarantine wing.
They would move you and your neighbors into a quarantine wing, even if your neighbors weren't sick yet.
Yeah.
And did they test people then? Do you know?
No.
Or they still didn't test people. So
14 days and they let you go.
they really had no idea of what,
Yeah.
who had COVID or who didn't.
Right. And mind you, they still not wearing masks at the time. The staff.
All the way into summer, they weren't wearing masks.
Right. Well, until when I left, they had just started. I left August the 20th, and they had really just started wearing masks. And even then, they took it light, like, you know, it was a joke or it wasn't real. Staff.
That's a long time into it. And were guys trying to, like, because I had heard stories about guys trying to bring like a soapy cloth by the phone, or because you just went one to the other to the phone, right?
Right.
Like you made a phone call and then you handed the phone. Somebody else kind of got right there and made a phone
Right.
call.
What I used to do is I would wipe the phone with my own, you know, like soapy sock. And then I would have a brand new sock, and I would put the sock on the phone over the receiver, and that's how I would talk on the phone. I know that sounds disgusting, don't it?
No,
it was a brand new sock.
It sounds like it might be hard to hear because I think sometimes.
Yeah, but
So
it worked.
We're trying to do what
The
they
best
could
I
by
can
themselves.
to protect myself.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's hard. I know. Did you get any video visits when you were there? Like,
I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate to have a few video visits, and I don't want to. Okay, I don't want to make it come across like I don't appreciate the people who video visit me, because I love them very much and they are very important in my life. But the videos was horrible because they would always cancel them, and then when you finally get one, they will you only 15-minute visits, and then they will wait and connect you like maybe once you like 10 minutes, you know, like when you got 10 minutes left or 12 minutes left, and then you will get your visit. Then the visit be freezing and grainy and everything, and a lot. Yeah, it was a horrible experience. Horrible, to the point where I didn't even like setting them up anymore.
that's exactly what happened to me and Eric, my son. Is the video visits were so terrible. They're only 15 minutes. And they would wait till the last minute to let him out to try to get there.
Exactly.
So you were at least 2 to 3 minutes into your 15-minute visit.
Easy.
And then they would freeze and they would pixelate.
Yeah.
And he finally told me, don't do any more of these. They're too frustrating.
Yeah.
It's too difficult for me to do these. So the video visits, and I don't know if any of your relatives or loved ones called, but when I called the prison, they would say it was GTL's fault.
Yes, they will always blame it on the GTL.
And
Always, and I just always tell them, like, okay, GTL not letting me out my room a couple of minutes late for my visit. You know, they not. So I don't understand how I can't see my family on the visit, but the officers on the other end that's watching the screen can see everything just fine. And I just never understood that. You know, if you say anything that they might deem as wrong, they can freeze your visit, stop your visit. They hear that, they see that, but they don't see when you constantly, hello, I can't see you, hello, hello. They don't see none of that. So, you know, that's pretty.
Yeah, it is like they're actually sitting with you because
yes,
they stay right on your visit.
They watch the screen the whole time.
So
yes.
There's nothing even a little, and there's not a lot of privacy in prison anyway.
Anyway, right.
Your phone calls are recorded, but that's actually like they sit at the table. I know Eric had told me a few times that officers came up to him afterwards about something we had discussed and said, oh, the reason we said did do this is because of this. And
yes,
that's disturbing.
Disturbing.
You know, that they
listen to everything.
to weigh in on your conversation that you had with your,
But not
fiance.
once have I heard an officer say, hey, that visit was horrible, was grainy. We're going to get on top of that. We're going to try to make sure it's better. None of that. You never hear that.
No.
They never, and I was, ever since they've been doing video visits and I was there, I never had a whole 15 minutes. Not once.
No,
Not once.
and they charge the families for it. And I know when I
Yes.
called GTL, that would be like a 45-minute wait on the phone for them to tell me it was the problem at the prison.
Yes.
So yeah, I completely get that. Now, the kind of a crazy thing, a pandemic, the last one, well, we had Ebola, but really the last really bad thing like this was like 1918, right? So we hadn't really been ready to experience anything like COVID in this country. People aren't used to having their movements restricted.
Right.
In prison you may be, but in the world it was very challenging for us. But I can't imagine being released.
It was so odd. One of my fellow co-workers, Wendell Robertson, and my fiance Sherry, they picked me up. And when they picked me up, when they released me and they walked me outside, it was just an empty room, just an empty, like, visiting waiting room kind of sort of. So I'm like, where everybody at? They said, no, you keep walking, go outside. So I left, I went outside, they opened up the gate, and then my co-worker, Wendell, and my fiance, they pulled up in the car, and they was not allowed to get out. I was not allowed to hug. They said, you get in the back seat. The police. So I get out. When they'll pull up, I get in the back seat and we pull off. So him and my fiance is in the front seat. I'm in the back seat, and we drove like that till we got off state property. And then I was able to get out and hug my family, hug my fiance and my friend and everything. It was just weird how even released. I knew how serious it was just by the way I was released.
That has to be wonderful being released. Of course, you wouldn't trade it to go home later, but it has to be a little anticlimactic because probably 29 years.
29.
You were probably thinking like the last few years when you knew you were going to be released.
Right.
You were probably planning this big.
And I released it. Yeah. And now they saying, no, they can't do that, and you can't do this, and you got to do it off state grounds. It was just a lot. Don't get me wrong, like you said, I was being released, so okay, just let me out of here, but yeah, it was so anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's just like, because you're waiting, you're planning, like, I'm going to see my family and I'm going to hug them immediately, and you have to get in the car and not hug anybody, and that had to be, especially since you hadn't seen Sherry.
Right.
Say in months.
Because no visits. I hadn't seen her in months because there was no visits.
It's hard to go without a hug for that long. I think.
Yeah.
I think the guys inside now who've gone 13 months without a hug, like a lot of them, it's got to be really difficult. So did this being released, did it change some of your plans on what you were going to do immediately?
It changed everything because I was released, and like literally I couldn't buy clothes. I couldn't, nothing, because nothing was open. Everything, and I remember clearly trying to find somewhere to have breakfast. Like literally just trying to find somewhere that would feed us. Me, Wendell, and Sherry. And it took us a while to find somewhere to just for me, just to have a meal.
That's true, because you got released from Vienna, which is probably about 8 hours from Chicago?
Yes.
So, yeah, that's a pretty long drive. If you didn't get to eat or stop and go to the restroom, you had to be scary.
Exactly. We couldn't do nothing. There was nothing open. It wasn't letting people. It took us a while to find a place to just have breakfast.
So you got tested the day you left. So actually, most COVID tests take at least 48 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they call and give you the results?
No.
So you just had to assume you were negative?
No, I had to get retested when I came home.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Me
that
and
was
my boss
tough.
went. Me and my boss went and got tested.
Yeah, and you were one of the lucky ones because you had a job waiting for you when you
I
got
had a
out.
job. I was very fortunate, very, and even with my boss securing my job, and I also paroled to my boss's house.
So that
So
was a good thing.
right. So and even with all the help, it was still so difficult. So I could just imagine someone just that didn't have the support I had trying to come home in that time. How
Well,
hard it
and
had to
that
be.
had to be a little difficult for your boss,
Mhm.
who is Joby
Yeah.
Gates, by the way, the
Yes, with
executive
Joby Gates.
director of Restore Justice.
Yes.
So with Joby, because suddenly you're in without testing, she's been kind of isolating and staying
Yes.
with her
And here
family.
she is, moved me in with her children and her husband.
And
Yes.
that had to be a little scary for everyone because you certainly didn't want to bring
Affect
COVID in.
anyone. Right.
Yeah. So did your family have concerns? Were you able to get together with all your family with COVID?
No, I had to I have yet to spend time with my grandmother. Because
Yeah.
so I have yet to spend time with her because of COVID. And a lot of other older family members I have yet to be in the room with. I've been home 8 months. And I have yet to be in the room with one of my older family.
Dramatic pause because I have dogs and I was hoping they would behave, but we will continue on. That is difficult, really. I feel you with your family members because how old is your grandmother?
My
Yeah.
grandmother is 89.
Oh, 89, and she probably
And she
counted
have yet,
her years on the day she would see you walk out of prison.
yes, because once my mother passed, which was her daughter, she became like the closest outside my son. She became like the closest relative I had. So I really, really was relishing hugging her and
Having
spending
her
time with her. Yeah, and I have yet to have that day.
Oh, I know that you've been vaccinated, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's good. Um, this is kind of going off script a little, but what do you think? I know that a lot of the correctional officers have refused the vaccination, and
Yes.
do you have any insight on that? Like, because they are working with a very vulnerable population.
Yes, and I talked to a lot of guys. I had a lot of friends I left behind in prison, so I get a lot of calls on a daily basis, and I ask, 'cause also my job, so I ask, and a lot of officers have opted out vaccination shots. They but yet the guys incarcerated have been really good at getting better than I thought they would with getting vaccination shots. They have really kind of like been on board. And it's funny, like the inmates is doing whatever they can to, take care of themselves, but it's void if the staff keep coming in affecting people.
Do you think that the incarcerated individuals were more on board? Like, why do you think that is? Just out of fear, or do you
I
think?
think, okay, I personally know 2 people who have passed the COVID that was incarcerated. And I was blessed enough to be home, when it happened, but I have a lot of friends that was there with them when our friends passed. So I think that when you see more than one person pass away from something, I think you want to make sure you okay. So a lot of guys was like, hey, okay, we might not be sure exactly what the vaccination do, but we know what COVID do.
Yeah, so the
And
lesson.
that's how they was thinking. Like, we might not be sure because it's so much debate about the vaccinations, but they knew what COVID do.
Yeah, so they figured that the better choice, it's better to maybe have reactions from a vaccine and
Exactly.
take your chances with, because you think medical treatment inside prison is,
Horrible.
yeah, would you be more susceptible to if you've got COVID and it really took over? do you think that they would react quickly
I
to
think,
that? And
I'm not gonna say I know, but just from what I've seen, I know a few people that have a few people that have passed away of COVID. So they ain't been doing too great.
yeah, they, do you think even when you went to the hospital? Because I know in the beginning, some of the hospitals, one of the scary things about COVID in prison is like if you take a prison like Menard, which has a couple of thousand inmates,
Yeah,
and the town of Chester is very small. So if people did get sick, they probably have 2 intensive care beds there.
right.
And do you feel like they wouldn't prioritize
I
like the
definitely
town
do.
itself, like that
Well,
might?
you got to realize, Julie, that when I was released, I had did 30 years, so I didn't have a medical card. I didn't have ID. I didn't have any of that. So, I wasn't established. I was fresh home after, and it was like I didn't exist. My social security number had never been used really in 30 years. People didn't even know. I was like a ghost. So it was really hard to get anything done at that time, whether it was the DMV, whether it was the hospital. It was a really difficult time. So I couldn't just walk in the hospital and be like, hey, here's my medical card. I didn't have one.
Right. Now, speaking of the IDs, that's brings me to, was it difficult to get your IDs? Do you think COVID
Yes,
made it more difficult?
yes, it was extremely difficult, because it was only like one that I know of at the time that was issuing IDs. There was only one Secretary of State office open, and we had to wait in a line that wrapped around the Secretary's office 5 times. It was just, and it would yes, it literally like took all day. And then when I got there, they was telling me I didn't have the proper documentation to get a state ID, but this is the documentation that the prison gave me and said would be sufficient for me to have ID. So I had to leave, go to another courthouse, get a birth certificate, and then do it all over again the next day.
So when you were released from prison, they gave you documentation
Yes,
and said you could just go and get your IDs.
yes,
And that's in the state of Illinois. And then
yes,
in the state of Illinois, you went to the Secretary of State facility, showed them what was given to you,
yes.
and were told it was not sufficient.
It was not sufficient.
So somewhere there's a breakdown in, because obviously the prison wanting you to succeed would want to give you the correct.
And once again, this in the midst of COVID, so courthouses and everything, you gotta, it's hectic. It was, yeah. It was really disappointing. I didn't understand. I didn't understand how. And you got to realize when you're incarcerated, they tell you like, well, once you get 3 months short of your out date, you apply for this ID, and you apply or whatever, and they make sure that you have an ID that can be transferred over, kind of like a temporary state ID. So you go through this when you're in prison. So you really think that okay, I don't apply, I got it, okay, I'm ready. And then when you come home and they tell you, what's that? No, that's not gonna work here. No, we need your birth certificate. We need this. That's not gonna work.
So I want to ask you now about technology. That has to be 29 years. Nobody
It
had.
was
So what was it like coming home and trying to jump into technology?
well, firsthand. Like when I first came home,
I'm right here.
I couldn't even turn on a cell phone. I would literally, somebody would call me and I would have to let them hang up and then push redial and call them because I didn't know how to swipe the I didn't know how to swipe to answer the phone. It was just, I had never had it wasn't any cell phones that I remember when I was on the streets. I got locked over the pager. So it was all super new to me. I didn't know how to turn on the phone.
Yeah, 29 years ago.
Luckily, once again, my boss, Joby Gates, she arranged for me to have computer classes and things and such with our office manager, Alice. So, and that helped a lot. Like personal one-on-one time to just somebody to teach you, and that's how I got back. I had
Yeah, because you
personal,
had to jump in and learn Zoom even, which none
yeah,
of us had to know before.
yeah, and then you gotta realize like my bosses, like about the boss is super, when it comes to Corona, they super careful. So we did this on the porch.
Ah,
In the colder months, we was on the porch teaching me computer lessons and how to work my phone and stuff.
I think you probably work it better than I do now, so
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's super great you're home. We're super
Thank
pumped
you.
about that. But do you feel like when you got home that your incarceration kind of extended beyond the walls a little bit with
Okay,
electronic
so
monitoring?
I had the oh, I'm so sorry. I had the weirdest, I'm sorry. I had the weirdest situation. I had came home and the parole people, okay, my good time had came through. So when my good time came through, they kicked me right out. They just basically told me, hey, you leave in the morning. So yeah, it was yeah, really weird. So when
Yeah,
I
but,
came, yeah, so it was like a really mad rush dash. So when I came home, the place that I wasn't trying to go, in the area that I really didn't want to be in, and I didn't think would be safe for my well-being, or that's where they put me. Forget where I had told them where I wanted to go be paroled to. They put me in the same crime infested area that I came from. All the time, my boss had been calling, letting them know, hey, he's coming here. I had told them I filled out the form and everything while I was going. They ignored that. So I had to spend a night uh, with a family member, and then that morning I was able to call the parole people and get it changed to where it's supposed to go. So I was home for like 3 weeks, and then my parole officer said, hey, you got to do house arrest. So after 3 weeks out the blue, I do house arrest for some months. So yeah, it was challenging.
so house arrest, it sounds like you're still,
Yes, ban on you, check in, the whole thing.
so you kind of are still incarcerated in some ways. I mean, it's still better than prison, but
Yes,
that's not saying a lot. Just because
right,
something's better than the worst thing anyone can imagine
exactly,
doesn't make it good, right?
right,
So 3 weeks you were okay to run around, but then they decided that they
right.
could restrict your movement. And how
You go.
restrictive was that?
Uh, from 8 to 8, from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, I was able to be out, and after 8 in the evening on, I had to be in. So 8 in the evening, I had to be in.
So how do they check that? Do they call you? Do you have to call in? I mean,
Yeah, well, they had
or
the monitor. Okay, they have a box, and they plug the box up in the home. So the monitor will let them know if you leave out the distance that they have,
oh,
of the apartment, whatever, by the
oh,
mouth.
because you have the electronic
Yeah, the electronic.
ankle bracelet.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Now you didn't have to pay for that though, did you?
No, I didn't have to pay for it. I think because they just sprung it up. I don't think my parole also knew I had to be on house arrest. That's why I think it took so long. And he was very apologetic. He was like, "Hey, this came from the parole board," but I had the paper saying the parole board didn't give me any kind of restrictions. But they decided to put me
Uh,
on house arrest.
that's so you say that you filled out the paperwork. When did they give you the paperwork for your release? Because suddenly they tell you you're going home tomorrow.
Right. They really give you your paperwork like 3 months to 2 months ahead of time, where you let them know where you want to go and this. Yeah. So I had already, but by me being in a minimum facility in Vienna, they had gave me my release, my paperwork where I want to go like months ahead of time. That's just what they do down there because everybody is so short. So they had been knew where I was supposed to go, but for some reason they just decided to send me somewhere else.
Without, I've heard stories about that. One of the guys got released from Stateville, and he was supposed to parole to his sister's house, and yet they put him on a train in Joliet late at night and said, "You have to be at this halfway house in Roseland by 10 o'clock tonight, you know, within 2 hours or something. And he had no idea where Rosalind even was.
Yeah,
He was locked up 35 years. And luckily, a stranger on the train took pity on him and said he could use his cell phone. But not only did he use his cell phone, he had to give the man his sister's number because he didn't know how to dial it,
he
right?
didn't know how
So
to dial it. Right.
it's just amazing that seems like we should, and that wasn't during COVID, so there was really
Yeah.
no excuse.
And you know, by me being incarcerated during COVID, you know, and we was on limited movement, I didn't get a chance to have release classes. I didn't have anything that would prepare me for to be released after 29 years.
Yeah, and they're going to start that 3 months ahead of time or whatever. It should have been started years earlier.
Yeah.
So now you work at for Restore Justice, but also at Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, which is a wonderful place. Wonderful place. Love it there. And you're mentoring kids.
Yes, I'm mentoring kids.
So what inspired you to do that, to work with kids?
Well, I really like what you do, outreach. So I really kind of want to do what you do. And our boss was like, hey, why don't you talk to kids? Why don't you, get, and she seen something in me that thought that it would fit, that it would work. And I ended up loving it. So 3 days out the week, I drive to the city on 51st in Elizabeth, and I mentor kids for a couple of hours. For a couple of hours. 3 days out the week, and then I pass out food from a block away or so to like less fortunate people every Wednesday. We do that as well.
Well, that's got to be, what age group are the kids?
The age, anywhere, we have a few young ones, but I said the majority of them is 16, 17, 15, 16, 17.
Now, do you think, because some of the kids have troubles, we'll just say it that way, and do you think that your experiences, like that they're more apt to respect what you've been through and can really relate to, hey, don't do that, because
very much so. I thought it would be more difficult, but the kids have been really receptive to me and my situation and my story, and I can talk to them, and prison reform and advocacy isn't the most fun topics to talk to a 16-year-old about, so you got to be creative, but they will listen. You just got to know how to talk to them about advocacy.
So do you think the work at Precious Blood is connected to Restore Justice's mission? Like,
very much so, because if there was a Precious Blood 30 years ago when I was 17 and I was a part of it, I wouldn't have went to prison for all that time. I didn't have a safe haven, a safe place, and that is really a safe place. They are doing a tremendous job there.
I applaud their work with returning citizens, because I too started at Precious Blood, and when I first started my family group and a lot of you guys were locked up, no one was home and no one was coming home.
Right.
And I can remember sitting with Father Kelly, who runs Precious Blood, and saying, they said, what do you imagine is like a dream, or what could happen? And I said, I really imagine someday seeing the people that I know in prison, who are remarkable human beings, coming here and working and helping our kids here. We have a better life. And you're doing that. You're making that happen.
Yeah, making that happen. Yeah.
Which is amazing. Amazing. I have just a final question. What are you really looking forward to, or what are you hopeful about in our post-COVID world? Like, what do you really want to do besides hug your grandma? Because I know that's number one.
I want to be around my workmates, because we don't really get a chance to do that because of the corona. So I'm really looking forward to like showing up at the office and people being there, and that's what I'm really looking forward to that. because I haven't experienced it yet.
Well, Nelson, I just want to thank you so much for opening up and chatting with us and Restore Justice and for sharing your
I appreciate it.
experiences.
Also, not to cut you off, I'm
No.
engaged, happily engaged. I'm engaged. Gonna get married very soon. Marry my childhood sweetheart, Sherry, and yeah, that's happening too.
Sherry was there for all those years.
And she was there for all those years. So yeah,
So
make honest woman out of it.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And congratulations on that. I
Thank
think
you.
that's wonderful. And you and Sherry, I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I would like viewers you can check Nelson's blurb on the Restore Justice website or the Precious Blood Youth Mentorship Program that Nelson is working on. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
No problem. I appreciate it. It was fun. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you everyone who are watching.